So after a long wait ever since her first appearance, YAE MIKO is finally here. She's the latest 5-star character and the first new Electro Catalyst user ever since launch, the only other Electro Catalyst being Lisa. Hi, my name is Avarice and today I'll be guiding you through her talents, weapons, artifacts, and much more. If you're looking for something specifically, I'll be leaving the timestamps below. So for a basic overview of YAE MIKO, we're going to be looking at her base stats at level 80, and keep in mind, these values are based off every Catalyst user at level 80. So for her HP, she has a total of 9,151, which is above average. Her attack is also pretty high at 300, but her defense is actually quite low at 502. Keep in mind that these values can quickly change due to the artifacts and weapons she has as well. For the materials needed to get YAE MIKO to Phase Ascension 5, which is the Phase Ascension we're going to be working with, you're going to need 1 Amethyst Silver, 9 Fragments, and 9 Chunks. You're also going to need Handguards, which is dropped by Nobushi and Kairagis. You're going to need 18 Old Handguards, 30 Kageuchi Handguards, and 12 Famed Handguards. You're also going to need 108 Sea Ganadorma, which can be found in beaches and tidal flats of Inazuma. And for the boss materials, you're going to need 26 Dragonhire's False Fin, which is a boss in Enkanomiya. For Phase Ascension 6, if you want to go that far, you're going to need 6 gems, 20 more fins, 60 more Ganadormas, and 24 more Famed Handguards. To get one of her talents from level 1 to level 8, you're going to need 6 Old Handguards, 22 Kageuchi Handguards, and 10 Famed Handguards. You're also going to need Light Books, which is obtained on the Violet Court on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. You're going to need 3 Teachings, 21 Guides, and 10 Philosophies. You're also going to need 2 Meanings of Eons, which is a weekly boss drop at the Oinaric Eudaimia, if I'm pronouncing that right. This will cost you your usual 502,500 Mora. This is if you want to get 2 talents to level 8, and this is for 3 talents to level 8. Miko's normal attack, Spirit Fox Sin Eater, has a moderate 3-hit combo. Here's her attacks in 4 different angles. And this is in slow motion. Her first hit is actually quite low at 63.5%. Her second hit is also quite low at 61.6%, and her third hit is 91%, which is below average. Her charge attack is also below average at 228.6% damage. Miko's plunge and low plunge is 97.1 and 194.2% damage. Her high punch is also 242.6% damage, and the reason I have these values in white is because all Catalyst users have the same exact damage at level 8. Miko's skill, Yakan Invocation, makes it so she dashes forward a bit once you tap her skill. If you have her standing still, however, she will simply dash backward. Once she finishes her dash, she will leave behind a Sesho Sakura, which will strike a single enemy 5 times over a period of 14 seconds, dealing electro damage. You can have up to 3 existing at once, as well in co-op, even if everyone is running YAE MIKO. If a 4th one is placed, the oldest one will disappear. Their levels increase based off of how many of them are active. The max level is 3 at C0, but you can push this to level 4 if you have her at C2. If no enemies are nearby, it will attack inanimate objects like boxes, barriers, or campfires, so be careful when using it in places where you need a heat source like Dragonspine. The cooldown on this is 4 seconds and the duration is 14 seconds for each Sesho Sakura. Miko's Burst, Great Secret Art, Tenko Kenshin, will summon a lightning strike dealing AoE electro damage. She will also use up every Sesho Sakura nearby, so it's highly recommended to have all 3 active before activating her burst. As you can see here, I activated her burst without any Sakuras active, and it basically does a single strike of lightning. However, here you can see after I activated all 3 Sesho Sakuras and then use her burst, those Sakuras will be used up as well, making the burst have additional lightning strikes. The cooldown is pretty long at 22 seconds and the cost is extremely high at 90 energy. She's the first character to have a burst cost more than 80, which was previously the highest cost for a burst. For her first passive talent, unlocked after the first Ascension phase, makes it so every time you use up her burst, every Sesho Sakura destroyed resets the cooldown for one of them, so you don't have to worry about the cooldown even if you use up all her Sakuras. As you can see here, I quickly used up every Sakura, then her burst as quickly as I could, and I got them back pretty much instantly. Her second passive talent, unlocked after the 4th Ascension, makes it so her Sakura damage will actually increase based off every point of her elemental mastery by 0.15%. And for her final passive talent, Meditations of Ayako, makes it so you have a 25% chance to get one regional character talent material, base material excluded, when crafting. The rarity is that of the base material. This is a little bit confusing, so let me explain. This means if you're crafting a book for someone, depending on the region, let's use Mondstadt books for example, you will have 25% chance to get a refund, but from a different set. As you can see here, I'm crafting Freedom Guides, but once Miko FX comes into play, I got a refund, but it's not a Freedom book. It's from a different set. Very, very weird to me in my opinion. Pretty much a gacha in an already pretty heavy gacha game. Now it's time for talent priorities. First, I will be recommending her skill. This is because her skill is actually pretty useful. She has a very short cooldown and they last a long time. You pretty much never have to worry about the cooldown since you can have them up pretty much 24/7. And also this is the only attack that actually scales off something, in this case her elemental mastery. So the more EM you have, the more damage it does. Second is her burst. I'm saying this because her burst is actually pretty useful, it does pretty good damage and it complements her skill as well. As we saw a minute ago, when you use her burst, her skill also gets used up for an additional lightning strikes. Not only that, as we also saw through her passive talents, if you use up her burst while all 3 Sakuras are active, you pretty much get them back anyways. And for her third is her normal attack. In my opinion, you can decide if you want this as high as your skill or burst, or if you leave it down below. This is because most of her damage is coming from her skill and burst alone, but at the same time she's not that bad when it comes to normal attacks. So like I said, this is your choice if you want to level this up as well or keep it down below. For Miko's first constellation, Yakan Offering, each time you use up her burst, Miko will restore 8 elemental energy for herself. Her second constellation, Fox's Moon Call, makes it so her Sesho Sakura will start at level 2 instead of level 1, and their max level is increased to level 4, and their attack range is also increased as well by 60%. Her third constellation, the 7 Glamours, basically increases her skill level by 3 and makes the maximum level be 15. Her fourth constellation, Sakura Channeling, makes it so every time her Sakura Lightning hits opponents, the electro damage bonus of all nearby party members is increased by 20% for 5 seconds. Her fifth constellation, Mischievous Teasing, increases her burst level by 3, making the maximum level be 15. And for her final sixth constellation, Forbidden Art, Daisesho, makes it so her Sesho Sakura's attacks will ignore 60% of opponents' defense. You thought the Raiden Shogun was bad having the same exact thing being locked behind C2? Nah, Yaemiko basically went up to here. For weapons, we're going over the top 3 5-star weapons that suit Yaemiko the best, as well as the top 3 4-star weapons. We're going to be discussing them at refinement level 1, just to keep things a little bit more simple. So for the first 5-star weapon we have is the Kagura's Verity, the latest 5-star catalyst that came out at the same time as Yaemiko herself. The second side on this is crit damage, and this weapon will increase your skill damage only by 12% every time you use her skill itself, up to 3 stacks. And once you have all 3 stacks active, your general elemental damage such as your normal and burst attacks will increase by an additional 12% as well. Coming in second is the Skyward Atlas. The second side on this is attack percentage, and what this weapon does is increase your elemental damage bonus by 12%. Also, normal attacks have a 50% chance to trigger an attack that targets enemies for 15 seconds, dealing 150 damage of your attack damage, which can only occur once every 30 seconds. And for the third 5-star weapon we have is the Lost Prayer to Sacred Winds. The second side on this is crit rate, and this will increase your movement speed by 10%. It will also increase your attack by 8% every 4 seconds when you are in a battle. The max is 4 stacks, and this effect will go away when she leaves the field or if you get out of combat. And for our 4-star weapons, first we have the O for an Eye. The second side on this is attack percentage, and this will increase your energy recharge by 24% for 10 seconds after using an elemental skill. This weapon is only available for this update, so if you need a weapon for Yaemiko, now's your chance. Coming in second is the Solar Pearl. The second side on this is crit rate, and once you use a skill or burst, it will increase your normal attack by 20% for 6 seconds, and vice versa. And finally, coming in third, we have the Whiffs. The second side is crit damage, and once you have her on the field, you will have a random ability that lasts 10 seconds, and can only occur once every 30 seconds. These abilities can either be an attack increase by 60%, elemental damage increased by 48%, or have elemental mastery increased by 240. Obviously these are good buffs, but I really wouldn't recommend it if you have other weapons I mentioned, since these abilities you get are up to random. For artifacts, first we will be going over the top 3 sets that can benefit Miko the most, then the substats. So for the first set, I recommend is a 2-piece Thundering Fury and a 2-piece Gladiators, or a 2-piece Shimenawa's Reminiscence. Both of these sets will greatly increase her overall damage output, and can serve well if you want to use Miko more on the field. For the second set, we have a 2-piece Wanderer's Trope and a 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. This leans more if you want to have more of a support playstyle. Increase her elemental mastery so others can take advantage, and once you have her burst up, you can deal much more higher damage than what it already is. And for the third set is a 2-piece Thundering Fury and a 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. This is more of a playstyle that sits a bit in the middle, so pretty much a sub DPS. You want to use Yaemiko in the field more, but you also want to charge up her very costly burst. So both of these sets will help you out on that. Now let's move on to the main stats. If you want to use Yaemiko as a DPS or a sub DPS, you want your sands to be an attack percentage, to increase how much damage she does obviously. For Goblet, you're going to want an electro damage bonus, I don't need to explain why. And for the hat, you're going to need a crit rate or a crit damage hat to increase your damage even further. And if you want to use Yaemiko as a support, you're going to want both her sands and Goblet to be elemental mastery. Since we're using her as support, she'll be off the field more, so elemental reactions will be far more favorable over an electro damage cup. And for her hat, you're going to want a crit rate or a crit damage hat to boost up the damage even further. And for the substats, you're going to want crit rate and crit damage. You also want to aim for elemental recharge and attack percentage if you're running her as a DPS of some sort. But if you're running her as a support, you're going to want elemental recharge and elemental mastery. For team recommendations, I'm simply going to list characters that can work pretty well for Miko and what type of playstyle they can be to suit Miko the best. This isn't a specific team choice, you can mix and match if you have the following characters to see what can suit you the best. I will also have alternatives for the following characters that can work very similarly or just as well in case you don't have them or if you just simply don't like using that character. So first we have the Raiden Shogun. It's highly recommended to have another electro character since the elemental resonance will give you a little bit more electro energy particles, which is very needed for Miko's 90 energy cost. But having the Raiden Shogun will benefit you the most since she herself can bring out more elemental particles for your entire team. You can also use her if you want to have Miko as a sub DPS or a main DPS, since they pretty much help each other off the field. If you don't have the Raiden Shogun, Fischl can work quite well as a DPS replacement or a battery. Up next we have Xingqiu for support. This leans more if you want to have more of a taser team. His burst does work with Miko's normal attacks, and since her skill damage bases off elemental mastery, elemental reactions with Xingqiu's burst will benefit her greatly. Kokomi does work just as good as Xingqiu, since she can just use her skill instead of having to charge up her burst like Xingqiu. But Xingqiu is far more easy to obtain, and at C2, his burst duration lasts a bit longer. If you just want to increase her damage overall without just having to depend on her skill, Bennett can be pretty helpful, since his burst will not only increase Miko's damage, but everyone else as well. If you're not a fan of being limited inside his radius, since you can't really keep enemies in one place, since you can't really freeze using Electro, you can use Sarah instead. Her skill does what Bennett burst does very similarly. But the thing is, her attack bonus is not that bad, but if you really want to make the most out of her attack bonus, since it lasts half the time than Bennett's burst, you want to have her at C6, which can be difficult to obtain. I have a handful of 4-star characters at C6, but Sarah simply doesn't want to cooperate. Kazuha can also be a great support for Miko, especially if you're running a dual Electro character and someone else that uses a different element to make the most out of Kazuha's burst damage. Of course, I won't leave out Sucrose for this one, since she is far more easy to get and her burst pretty much does just as good as Kazuha's burst. And if you want to keep Yaemiko as a sub DPS or a support, then you want to have Keqing as your main DPS. She is definitely not a bad damage dealer and can also take advantage of her elemental resonance. But if you don't have Keqing, Beidou can work as well. Although in my personal opinion, I felt a little bit iffy on this one. Not because Beidou is bad, but her burst is also quite high as well at 80 energy. But at the same time, you can have someone else as a sub DPS and keep Yaemiko as a support for this one. Honestly, I do believe Yaemiko is a solid sub DPS, but has a lot of cons. I thought the Raiden Shogun was bad when it came to unlocking her full potential as a main DPS being locked away at C2, but YAEMIKO gets a very similar benefit all the way at C6, so very few people will ever get to see that. It also doesn't help that she's the only character to have an energy cost of 90, which is extremely expensive. I know that the current weapon that is available right now does help quite a bit on her recharge, but this weapon won't be available once it's over. So if some random player joins at the end and gets YAEMIKO somehow, and couldn't complete the event in time or something, that player is going to have to struggle a little bit more for that energy recharge. It's also weird that her skill damage also scales off elemental mastery through a passive talent and not through the skill itself. I feel like it could have been a bit more useful if it was on a skill, so the scaling can increase the higher the level talent you have it, but oh well. She's definitely not beginner friendly at all, since you do need multiple endgame materials, and I feel like she does also need another electric character for a battery if you want to have her burst up at a reasonable rate. Also, it does suck how her true damage potential is locked away by multiple constellations, so I will say she's a good sub DPS but not a main one. This is because since her skill is based off EM, you want to take full advantage of this by causing reactions, meaning she'll be off the field. And her normal attacks is pretty slow and doesn't do much damage compared to other normal attacks or her own skill. Anyways, this was my guide to YAEMIKO. If you liked the video, please leave a like, it will help me a lot. I also have a few other guides if you're curious about that, and I have the videos up right here. And yeah, this is pretty much the end. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you liked it enough, also consider subscribing. So yeah, thank you again, and I will see you next time.